one of my favorite segments here. Better, worse, same. Kind of getting into it. So obviously teams and players and coaches that are better than I thought, things that I thought are worse than I thought, and then things that I had, about right. So we'll get into that here up next. So first up on the list is Dan Lanning. Dude's a hater. I mean, there's no other way to put it. You probably tell that from his preseason comments about Colorado not winning anything in the conference. And that's true. I mean, that was a hater comment when it didn't need to be. Those comments did bug me because I was like, well, you haven't won anything in this conference either. And then Oregon fans, getting after him. Like, Oregon's been a stepping stone job. Chip Kelly left to go take a better job in the NFL. Mario Cristobal took a better job in South Florida, in Miami. Like, Oregon's a stepping stone job. Now, granted, so is Colorado, but it's like you're the same. Although, I mean, I guess you bounce higher up out of Oregon than you do Colorado. But then his comments going into that game, they play for clicks, we play for wins. That's a hater, and that is a hater, and I love it. I think it's exactly what that fan base needed. A little bit of not just getting smoked like that, but also, kind of getting what you've been putting out here over the last couple of weeks. So that was cool to see. Dan Lanning, way better than I thought. Way bigger of a hater than I anticipated. And then, I mean, football wise, they looked that, there's levels to it. There's your top 25 team, and then there's, you're competing for a conference championship. And then there's teams that want to play for national championships. There's teams that want to make the playoff. And Oregon's one of those teams Colorado ran into. They're still a couple of tiers away, but man, that was, as they've been saying, that was personal. Up next, Ohio State, better than I thought. Yeah, I had a lot of doubts, especially after that first game against Indiana. I didn't know if I could buy into Kyle McCord as QB1 at Ohio State. For the first time, Ryan Day hasn't had a solidified top 12 draft pick quarterback. So what does that do? He's got some questions to answer as far as, playing Michigan the last couple of years. So how has that gone? And Notre Dame was a test that I think Notre Dame was very much set up to win that game. And as you see, Marcus Freeman's on this list as well. So we'll talk about their side of that game. But, I mean, that's a tough game to win. And that's a tough drive to orchestrate down the road for Kyle McCord. So impressed with him. Overall, Ohio State, yeah, they're good. They're good. I don't think they're as good as they were last year. But I think you can say that about a lot of teams. And I don't think that you need to be as good as Ohio State was last year to make the playoff and even compete for a national championship. So Ohio State, they're definitely still around. They're very much relevant in the CFP race. Up next, Washington State. Cougars, I mean, that's a big win against Oregon State. And they looked so good too. I mean, and I love their uniforms as well. I love the maroon colors. Don't get me wrong, but the gray and the white uniforms, I thought were pretty spot on. It looked like they were going into work. And so far, schedule 50-24 win in Fort Collins against Colorado State. That's a good win. 31-22 at home over Wisconsin. That's a good win. 64-21 over Northern Colorado. That's a big win. I mean, there's no chink in the armor there in those three games. And then you play Oregon State, who's coming in hot. Granted, they almost blew it. Don't get me wrong. That's not great. But what was that? 14, 28, 35, 35, 14 at half, or 35, 14 going into the fourth quarter. Cameron Ward, 404 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's a real team. when I was looking at the Pac-12 this this year, doing my preseason predictions, I kind of chalked up like different tiers for the Pac-12. It seemed very clear cut to me. There was the top tier with USC, Oregon, Utah, and Washington. And then there's the next tier, the tiers who teams that could possibly make the Pac-12 championship if they pull off an upset, one of the above teams get hurt. But I think Washington State might be looking to break out of that second tier. It's also tricky because while I think Washington State, compared to other Pac-12 champions, are right there in the thick of like the previous two Utah teams. That USC team a few years ago with Sam Darnold. I think this Washington State team could absolutely keep up with them, but everyone else in the Pac-12 has also made this huge leap to where whoever wins the Pac-12, they're knocking on the doorstep of winning a national championship. I mean, you probably go into the Pac-12 championship thinking in the locker room, both of these teams think that they are good enough to win a national championship, and that just hasn't been the case in the Pac-12. So I don't know if Washington State's graduated out of that second tier yet, but I mean, they're looking good. Worse than I thought, Clemson. I've been a big Clemson defender, especially after that Duke game, because you also got to remember, while the score was pretty lopsided in that Duke game, and it was on Monday night, so everybody was watching, they outplayed Duke. They were the better team. They had more yards. They had more first downs. They were better on third down. They were able to pass the ball better. They were able to run the ball better. They had better time of possession. Then you sprinkle in 2 red zone turnovers and a very experienced Duke team. They're going to make you pay for that. But Clemson was leading at halftime. Clemson was within a touchdown going into the fourth quarter. Then, yeah, Duke gets a couple of late touchdowns, blows up the score. But for, that game, first of all, Duke's a good team at home. So losing that game isn't worth dropping out of the rankings. I think they dropped like 16 spots the next week. And then they beat up on some FCS team and then drop another 4 spots out of the rankings or whatever. And I don't think. And then they play Florida State tight. They have an accountant as a kicker, fresh off of Wall Street. And they play that game pretty close. They lose it in overtime. The first time I think Florida State's beaten Clemson in like 7 years. But there are some true signs of concerns for me. I don't think that they're a bad team. They still might be the third or fourth best team in the ACC after that kind of top tier of like Florida State and North Carolina. It kind of drops off pretty heavy after that, outside of Clemson. As you'll see next on my list, one of those teams who's been disappointing, but overall, they're good, not great. They haven't used the transfer portal as well as even Florida State has. I mean, the receiver who caught the game-winning touchdown pass for Florida, he transferred in from Michigan State. Why didn't Clemson get him? Why didn't Clemson get, one of these 60 guys to come into Colorado? You got to evolve with the times, and I don't think that Dabo Swinney has done that, and I think that's why they're actually in trouble, and that's why they're worse than I thought. Up next, Pittsburgh. Not a whole lot of in-depth football knowledge here as far as analytics, but they've been disappointing. 1-3 to start the year. They beat up on Wolford. Congratulations. They lose to Cincinnati at home. Cincinnati might not be as good of a loss as we may think, and then losing to West Virginia on the road, I guess it is what it is. West Virginia, by the way, beat Texas Tech, so that's maybe a better loss than initially anticipated. But it's losing to North Carolina 41-24 at home. Jurkovec looked very bleak, 11 for 15, 109 yards. And overall, just it didn't even feel that competitive watching it. I mean, I guess they got over 100 rushing yards. That's pretty cool. But man, when you look at teams who are competing for a conference, it's not just who's the flashiest. Like Florida State, they blew the doors off LSU. That's impressive. It's not just that. It's about how competitive you are in your losses. And I get that they've had 2 back-to-back weeks where they've lost games within, single digits. But man, you got to be a little bit better than that, don't you think? Against North Carolina. And I like North Carolina. I don't think that they're 20 points better than Pittsburgh. How he's going into the season, I didn't think that. But like I said, Pittsburgh is, in fact, worse than I thought. Marcus Freeman, the entire game, I was defending Marcus Freeman and the coaching. Like, it's fine. The coaching's fine. This is what good games look like. This is what it looks like when you play good teams. Even if you are as prepared and established and what you're doing is working, sometimes it may not look like that because the other team is pretty good too. And I thought that's what the case was until I heard that on the final 2 plays, Notre Dame only had 10 guys on the field, which that's on the coaches. That's on Marcus Freeman. That's on the defensive coordinator. That's on the defensive line coach. That's on the players out there. You have to coach them to look out for that. Like if you're a linebacker and you think, hey, there's usually somebody in front of me. I know that there's supposed to be somebody in front of me to do something, and there's not. And he went on and said that he absolutely could not accept a penalty by having the guy run on late. The ball was already on the 1 yard line. That's like a foot and a half worth of penalties. So yeah, you don't want to take a penalty there, but you also, and also it's another thing if it's like a safety who may or may not be involved in the play, but Ohio State definitely noticed it. Ohio State definitely saw, hey, they are missing a defensive lineman, and they ran right to it and they scored. And it wasn't like he walked right in where it was like, well, he probably would have scored anyways. No, I mean, it was, half a yard, quarter of a yard close. Like we're talking like 10 inches maybe. And I don't know, hard to think that an extra defender there wouldn't have played a deal. And like I said, even if you do get called for a penalty and they get an extra crack at it from a foot and a half closer, I mean, you still kind of go into that thing. Well, it's my 11 guys versus your 11 guys. Who can stop who? All you need is a yard. All we need is a stop. Who's going to win? Not, I don't know. It just seems crazy. You can't have that. Just can't have that. Teams that I felt the same about, Kansas State looked like that they were, about the Kansas State team that I had expected them to be going into it. Will Howard still obviously hobbled. He didn't look 100% healthy. But Central Florida, their first conference game as a Big 12 member, not getting a great draw, having to do a 2 Manhattan, but overall, like that's a good team who's looking to make a statements here. They're hungry. They played well. They didn't let Kansas State off the hook for anything. But Kansas State, hung tight. They did exactly what they needed to do. Then as the game went on, they built their lead. I certainly didn't feel like it was a blowout. I didn't think that Kansas State was miles better than Central Florida, but that's what Kansas State does, and I think that's what's preparing them to, ideally make another run at Arlington. We'll see. Mississippi State, real quick. I know that they were on the same tab last week, but I'm going to keep them on here until there's a single game where I miss, right? Because we're a quarter of the way through the season. I'm undefeated, right? And there's, if you look at it, 15 bookmarks waiting to tell me that I'm wrong, 17 comments telling me how wrong I am. I haven't missed yet. And we look at it, Southern Louisiana, all right, whatever. Arizona, whatever. They didn't look good against Arizona, by the way, but they still picked up the win. I called that. They lost against LSU. I called that. They lost to South Carolina. I called that. And like I said here, I'm going to miss a couple of these. I don't think that Mississippi State's that bad to where they don't win a game in conference play. Auburn looks like a winnable game. Kentucky is on, could be a winnable game. Arkansas doesn't look as strong of a, well, it depends on which Arkansas team shows up. Um, but I don't feel like any team other than Southern Mississippi, other than Western Michigan, which they both have as wins for the Bulldogs, by the way. I don't think there's a single team on the schedule that's head and shoulders better than Mississippi State. Again, there's a couple of toss-ups. Arkansas's at home. Auburn's at home. Kentucky, if I had to give them a win today, I'd probably look at Kentucky and Auburn. But even if they beat Arkansas, Auburn, and Kentucky, I'm 3 games off in a 12-game slate in the SEC, the conference I don't particularly know that well, or at least like on a depth level. Yeah, I mean, I'm taking victory laps here, and again, they'll be on here until I miss a single game. I have a feeling they're not going to beat Alabama this week, so I'm gonna keep them on there for next week. I have a good feeling that they're going to beat Western Michigan, and I'll tell you what. Well, if they lose to Western Michigan, then they're probably going to go on the worst then tab. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about halfway through October, and I haven't missed once on Mississippi State, so we'll see. I got my receipts as well, but back to the original project at hand. So far, I've been absolutely right about Mississippi State. But we'll see. We'll see. I think the SEC as a whole, I got to stop looking at the AP rankings. They make me angry. Like, it is what it is. They make me mad. But because Florida barely held on against, was it Colgate or something? Some Charlotte maybe? I don't know. But they didn't cover the spread and they moved up 3 spots. Ridiculous stuff. SEC bias is crazy. I think it's like undefeated teams and then like 1-loss teams are in, and then 3 SEC teams. So let me actually take a look here at the top 25. I don't want reactions. I want just the rankings. Give me a list. Yeah, we'll share this tab instead. Okay, so we're looking at the AP top 25. So undefeated team, undefeated team, undefeated team, undefeated team. There's Notre Dame. 1-loss SEC team, 1-loss SEC team, undefeated, undefeated, 1-loss Oregon State. Okay, so I guess it's not all SEC teams. Then 1-loss SEC team. Ole Miss hasn't looked great either. Tennessee 3-1. They don't have a quarterback, so it's silly that they're in here. Florida, like I said, they moved up 3 spots. Who was that team that they played? They played Kentucky. No, they played Charlotte. They beat them 22-7. Couldn't score more than 22 points on Charlotte, and they move up 3 spots. All right. SEC team 4-0, 4-0. Kansas State 57 votes. I think Kansas State's better than Fresno State. I definitely think. Well, it's hard to put Kansas State in there, and then even out here you have Kentucky just waiting for an opportunity. TCU's looked nothing but good since that lost against Colorado. So that's silly to me. Colorado did drop out of the poll, which I didn't quite expect. Kind of talked about they're not one of the 25 best teams in the country, but they've earned it. You know what? I'll say it. I think Colorado absolutely should be ranked ahead of Florida. They deserve it. They have 3 Power 5 wins. 2 Power 5 wins. Okay, let me look at Florida again because I don't. So they've lost at home. They beat McNeese. They've beaten 1 Power 5 team. And yeah, their loss isn't as bad, I guess. But what have you done? Not like what have you avoided? Like what have you done? I don't know. Anyway, the SEC is not very good, but they're getting the AP boost, which it is what it is. I don't have any specific cases of SEC slander this year, but Ole Miss is probably another one where it's like, they looked good against Alabama, so we're gonna keep them in the AP poll. I mean, it is what it is. I think I'm just so tired of the SEC bias is all. Anyways, that's all I had for Better, Worse, the Same. Again, we go live Husker Hangover every single Sunday. After Husker games, we'll talk about that. Just a brief reaction to college football. Tomorrow, we have an episode of. So on Monday, we'll have this on YouTube and Spotify so you can relive the excitement. Tuesday will be first episode of Cornerhusker Connection, and then we'll alternate that. So the Big 12 show will be on Wednesday, and then Cornerhusker Connection on Thursday, and then Bookie Brook and the boys winning some money on Friday. Spoiler, we all had a really good week. Not really good, but the best weeks so far. So that'll do it for me here today, but hop on the Cornerhusker Connection Network. Lots of great stuff going on. Go Big Red.